here we go. Welcome back, Samboners. Welcome to the Samboners show, Mr. Tom McCarthy. How we doing today, pal?
I'm doing great. Beautiful day. Getting ready for a little baseball. I was at the ballpark yesterday. It was awesome. So, yeah, we're excited to get going.
Tom, talk to me, though. What was it like waking up today? Is it that Christmas morning type of feeling? What was it like for you?
Yeah, it is. You know, it's funny. We had to do a bunch of things yesterday, a bunch of rallies around Philadelphia yesterday, and also I had to do a dinner last night. And I kind of sat there as I was driving home. I said, man, I wish the game was today. It's just that's the kind of anticipation you have for it. It's definitely like Christmas. You know, it's opening day kind of on steroids. I always liken it to. I mean, it's just going to be explosive. The fact that it's an 8:08 start in Philadelphia, I mean, Colin knows this. I mean, they're going to be lubed up and ready to go. I mean, it's and it's going to be raucous. I mean, I'm excited for. I'm just excited for the whole energy of it.
No, it's absolutely right. It's like your kids waking up and you tell them you can't open up presents until 8 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, I got up at 6:15. Well, I usually get up early anyway. I got up at 6:15. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I've got like 9 hours before I need to get to the ballpark. So then I just thought I'm probably going to get there really early and just like knock out some cameos and do some research and just sit there and just kind of soak it all in.
I love it. I love it.
Are you a big breakfast guy, Tom?
I am. I've been trying to drop some LBs though, so I don't really eat the way I used to eat as far as breakfast goes. So I mean, I just finished a gluten-free bagel with egg whites, and the only thing I exploited, I was able to push on was a little sausage patty. That was the only thing. So
you still having a couple of beers though, Tom? No.
Pretty much all I could have though, Colin. That's the amazing thing with this. You know, it's if I have more than two, I'm like, uh-oh. So I have this pattern where I don't even have anything at the ballpark if I'm, you know, driving home. When I get home, I got on my deck. I get some Old Heights Brewery, which is a great place near me. And it's you know, that's usually what I do. I was planning on doing that yesterday, but then all of a sudden I lost the day.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny. There's some folks from Pennsylvania that came down here to work on some things in Annapolis where I'm at, and they were like, we drove by the stadium this morning at like 5 a.m., 4 a.m., and the lights were on.
Yeah.
The big screen's just playing replays.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's electric, man. Can you put a feeling? Can you describe it? What's South Philly's like? The community, the culture, the team, and then the game kind of all in one, because I know you've been a part of it for quite some time now.
Yeah, it's hard to replicate. You know, it's funny. I was at a Eagles-Vikings game several years ago with Gabe Kapler, who was our manager at the time. And I mean, it was pretty raucous there. They did the skull chant at Lincoln Financial Field. And I turned to Gabe. I said, this is what it's going to be like when we get back to the postseason. I said, but it's going to be even different, like even more. It's hard to explain it to anybody that hasn't been here. Now, I've done playoff games at Shea Stadium when I left the Phillies for a couple of years. That was pretty loud too. But there's nothing like this. This is you just feel like your whole body is shaking when they get to the point, like when Harper hit the home run last year against the Padres, or Rhys Hoskins hit the one against Strider last year. It's what sports is supposed to be like on the highest level when something matters. And you know, it obviously matters to the folks in Philadelphia. They're at the top of the list when they're winning. I mean, they get behind it. I mean, you look at how much the ticket costs are on the secondary markets. It's incredible right now, even for a game one of a wild card.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Tom. Again, thank you for joining the show this morning. The special day today, just having you on as we kick off wild card weekend. But can we like dive into that fan base? Like, what makes that Philly fan base so special, like across the country versus other fan bases? And not to take anything away from anybody else, but you know, from a traveling standpoint, like, could you imagine, Tom, if in a few weeks from now the Phillies are playing the Orioles in the World Series? Like,
no. It was kind of like when the Phillies played the Yankees in 2009 and it was 90 minutes. I mean, that was crazy to see how they traveled. No, I cannot imagine what it's going to be like. I just think that every market cares. I don't want to underscore every market.
Sure.
But every market cares. But there's just something about this one there's a confidence that they exude in their sound when they're at a game that's difficult to replicate. I do think Boston is close to it when the Red Sox are in, but it's hard to replicate the confidence that the individual and collective confidence that a fan base has when their team is in the postseason.
I think too, it goes with the culture of the folks, the history of the city, the blue collar mindset, Philadelphia versus the world, people coming together.
Yeah, Rocky against Apollo, that type of
exactly.
Yeah.
You have the old school Italians and the Irish, and like all these cultures come together, and it's unique. I played football all over the country. We met in Chicago, and I was with the Bears, and I had a buddy that is from Philly, but a scout for the Bears, and he said it best. He's like, Philly, man, it's like climbing a mountain with the fans. Chicago, they're like this the whole time. They're at 70%, but Philly, they'll be at 100% one day and 10% the next, happy and best feeling in the world, and then absolutely pissed off and miserable. And to me, I wouldn't have it either way. Like Miles Sanders the other day, he said, I'm upset that Panthers fans like booed when we were 0-4. I'm like, if you're 0-4 in Philly, they're booing when you're 0-1.
Well, there was some booing this weekend, even though they beat the Redskins, or the Commanders. Excuse me. Even though they beat them, there was some booing this week. I mean, it was just the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's you wouldn't want it any other way.
So, Tom, shifting gears just a little bit, can you talk to us about working alongside Krucker? Like, how is that even possible? How do you get through a game without practically laughing your heart out?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people ask me about, what goes into the preparation for a game by John or in general. Now, John is really smart and he reads a lot of stuff. And he has everything. His recall of things is remarkable. But when they ask me about planning things, I said, there's no planning. I said, when he says something, I'm hearing it for the first time, just like everybody else is hearing it for the first time. Now, we have an office, and he'll be laying on the couch before a game, and he'll start spouting certain things off. So sometimes I have an idea of where he's going to go, but I don't know where he's going to go most of the time. And to me, that's what makes it so organic and natural. And the fact that there's no scripting of anything, and at any given moment, a story from West Virginia that I've never heard before comes up, whether it be about goats or about a buddy of his that that they stole a cop car or something like that. I mean, this stuff happens, man. It's organic, and I think that's what makes it great.
I love it. Now, staying in line with kind of the announcer booth. Can you kind of lean in on your experience working alongside Harry Kalas? Like when these moments come to us on a day like today, right? Rest in peace, Harry, one of the greatest. I've been going down to Phillies games ever since I was a kid with my dad. Veteran Stadium, second row behind the home dugout. That statue now sits out there in left field. Can you just kind of share some of that inspiration that Harry left with everybody there in the Phillies organization?
Well, I've always told people, and I think you guys can feel this too. I don't know if there's a more, and it may be dissipating a little bit, but for a generation of fans, I don't know if there's a more beloved figure in Philadelphia than Harry Kalas. Now, I say that it might be dissipating a little bit because it depends on the age group. This age group, there's probably players that would slide into that mode, or guys like Merrill Reese that would slide into that mode. But for Philly fans, Harry was probably the most beloved figure in Philadelphia for about a 20-year period. And part of that was Harry and Whitey, Richie Ashburn, because their partnership was so keen. He and our desks were next to each other. I spent my first 5 years with the Phillies. When I got the Mets job, he was one of the first people that called me. When I was coming back to Philadelphia 2 years later, he was the first person that called me. I remember calling a Scott Rowland home run my first year doing play-by-play for the Phillies, and I looked over and Harry his head was nodding up and down like, that was great affirmation from my standpoint.
Goosebumps.
His penmanship was the smallest penmanship you will ever see on a scorecard, to the point where, we all write certain ways where nobody else can read our handwriting. We're like doctors in some ways. I don't know how he even knew what he was writing down. And I have in my closet over here and even back over here, I have almost every scorecard I've ever had for baseball from the minor leagues on. And after every game, he would take his scorecard and he would just put it right in the garbage. And that would be it. And he wouldn't see it anymore. But he was tremendous on so many levels. And I don't think to this day that anybody, and this is, I'm not knocking anybody else in the game, but nobody made the bigger call better than Harry made the big call. And I think we're all in a distant second and third to what he was able to provide with big calls.
I love it, man. Thank you for sharing that.
That's great, man. He truly is a legend, voice of my childhood. You were as well, and that's where we met in Chicago. I screamed in, you're meeting with Mick Trubisky. I was with the Bears, folks, for those listening, and I'll tell a story briefly because we got to get back to baseball. But I'm with the Bears. I look down the sideline, and there's Tom McCarthy getting ready to call Bears-Browns Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And this was the day before, right? So you're getting ready to meet with the quarterbacks and the head coaches and the best
and John Fox in his raspy voice.
Yes, it was John Fox and Mitch Trubisky and probably Mike Glennon. And I run up the steps, and you're in a big meeting with them. I burst the door, and I'm like, "Go Phils, Tom! Nice to meet you." We've been friends ever since. It's great, but I digress. I think shifting back to this current team. Before we get into the team and what you're looking forward to and your predictions of this run, there's always a debate and conversation on this show and all our shows here not for long about Bryce Harper. I think Bryce and Jason Kelce, to me, are the most impactful, loving, caring, embraced, leaning into fans leaning into them, leaders in the community, and then the top of their profession, literally the top. Which is so hard to do, and then do all that stuff too at the same time, coming from someone who's at the bottom of the profession and still trying to do it all. To explain Bryce, what he means to the fans, the community. You see him up close and personal every day, and then you get to see him as a player. Like, explain Bryce Harper.
Well, he's a different cat. It's funny when he was with the Nationals his first couple of years from a distance as the opponent, I used to think, he's overrated. He's this. And then I met him one day in the dugout, just met him, just asked him a question about something. I was like, wow, that's a pretty good dude. And then when he came to Philadelphia and signed with the Phillies and embraced everything, the city, let's put it in order. The fanatic, the city, everything. For the first couple of years, people used to say, Bryce, he can't get to the postseason. I'm like, guys, Bryce Harper's the least of the Phillies' worries. From a marketing standpoint, from a personality standpoint, he doesn't miss anything at all. And that to me is really cool. Like, he's a huge fan of the game, whether from baseball, but he's a fan of everything else. Like, he knows everything going on in the city. And I love getting text messages from when I'm doing football games. So we watching a football game. I love just chatting with him about just life. He's the father of 2 kids. He's like you. He's like all of us when it comes to our families. He just gets it. He was made for this city on so many levels. And beyond that, he was just made for the big moment. Think about I want to get this right. His 1,000th hit was his 200th home run. His 1,500th hit was his 300th home run.
No way.
He gets the home run the opposite way last year when the Phillies needed it against the Padres. It's just made for it. I say that he's a cyborg because I really do. I think he's just a different cat when it comes to rising to the occasion, but also understanding this marketplace. And it's the greatest thing in the world.
My brother Joe and I were just talking about that. So the night that Philly Rob, Mr. Thompson, the skipper, gave everybody like the green light after they clinched. And who are the only 2 guys that wanted to show up and actually play? Yeah. Not being one, Harper being the other. And Harper hits that go-ahead home run. Like, that's just something different, right? And it's really tough to explain. It's definitely a debatable conversation as him becoming one of the greatest Philadelphia Phillies of all time.
And Colin knows this as an athlete. I don't know how sometimes guys are able to get their heartbeat down.
Oh,
I struggle with it, Tom.
I struggle as a person. I mean, I've got a pool guy coming over to put new concrete in, and I'm excited about that. I don't know if I can keep my tempo down for that. I don't know how he does it. I mean, even for me, take it from a non-athlete perspective.
I would be calling games at Temple doing radio, and I'm doing breathing exercises to bring my heart rate down.
Exactly.
Now, as a player, I'm fine with it. On kickoff return, I stand at the 40-yard line. I'm ready for some dude to run 40 yards full speed at me. But, that's just how it is. C-Mac was the best at it. Harper, C-Mac, Justin Jefferson, they just are out on a walk.
That's what the greats do. They're able to slow it down down to the point where it's almost in slow motion when they're seeing it.
Unreal.
Tom, we got a couple questions from the fan bag. The Samboners is a very like-minded cult following here in Philadelphia. The first question comes from our good friend Jason Barnes, a.k.a. Fat Jesus. Which ballpark, major, minor, little league, has the best food along your travels?
Well, that's a great question. I actually, ours is great, but that would be a lack of objectivity on my part, quite frankly. We have this burger down left field line at Boardwalk Eats it's peanut butter and jelly burger that I think is just phenomenal. Phenomenal. But again, that would be a lack of objectivity. I do love, there's this stir fry place in St. Louis that's great. But I love San Francisco. I think San Francisco's got some of the best food. They've got a carving station that I like. I like their pizza, which is weird because it's California, but it's just a brick oven that's really good. And so San Francisco probably is mine. And I do like their garlic fries, although I don't usually partake if I'm have to do an open or anything like that, because that wouldn't be fair to the guy next to me.
All right, last question. Our good friend, Mr. Patrick Malloy. What is the biggest mistake you have made during a game?
Well, mistakes happen all the time during a game. I remember, the biggest mistake I've ever made wasn't even doing a game. And I've told this story before to classes, so I'm not afraid to tell it anymore. I'm just really getting started in the business, and I'm down here in my office, which used to double as a studio, and still kind of doubles as a studio, although there's so much crap in here. It's hard to say that, but I'm doing an ESPN overnight show nationally, and Maryland had just won the basketball national championship. And my producer, Rob Kelly, and I have done a bunch of interviews leading up to the 1 a.m. show. I think I was filling in for Bob Valvano at the time.
Wow.
And I had been doing a bunch of shows during the week on a ESPN station in Philadelphia. It was before maybe I had gotten the Phillies job at this point. Anyway, I was still doing these shows. So I was kind of tired. So we had finished all these interviews. It's like 11 o'clock. And I said, hey, Rob, I'm going to go sit on a kitchen chair in my other room here in my basement, watch more of the highlights and stuff like that. I said, I'll be back on, 15 minutes before we go on. I was like, all right. So I kept my ISDN line open, all this stuff. So I'm sitting there, I'm watching highlights, and all of a sudden my wife comes running down the stairs and says, Tom, wake up, your show started. And I'm like, this is like 2 hours later. And I'm in the most uncomfortable chair ever. And I'm like, what do you mean? I just sat down. She goes, no, your show started. You fell asleep. Rob just called that. We didn't have cell phones at the time. Rob Kelly called the house phone. And I'm like, holy cow. And I'm like, I run the 10 feet over. I put my headsets on. I'm like, what happened? And he starts laughing. He goes, you fell asleep. But the show had begun.
Classic, man.
So that was probably the biggest mistake I ever made, which turns out to be a life lesson that, listen, you can make mistakes and life will go on. You just have to allow it to go on. It was one of those 6 second, 6 minute, 6 hour, 6 day, 6 month thing. I thought I was done at that point.
Yeah.
Too good.
That's beautiful. Tom.
But the other stuff, like making mistakes on the air, I think the other day, Marsh hit a home run, and I said, that's a 2-run shot. And I see 3 guys around home plate. I'm like, wait a minute, that's a 3-run shot. That stuff happens all the time.
I love it.
That's great. Hey, man, we can't thank you enough for joining us. I know you got to run here. Best of
my
luck.
pleasure.
What's the plan here? So you're done calling Phil's games.
Well, I'm going to do radio. I'll do
radio, right?
I'll do the middle 3 innings of radio, which I'm really grateful for, because TV guys usually just, they walk around the stadium as ambassadors at this point in the year. So I'm really excited about that opportunity to be on the radio again. So I'm thankful that the Phillies give me that chance. And Scott Fransky, my buddy who does the radio, he leaves the door open for us. So that's pretty cool.
That's great. Big thanks for coming on, Tom.
Yeah, Tom, thank you for coming on.
You got it, guys.
Tonight, I'll be in the house tonight. So
awesome, enjoy it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Tommy.
Pop that Sambone, and baby, it's on. Dropping 45 minutes.